Hi everyone, welcome to Bold Conjectures with Paras Chopra. Today I am with Jeff Booth, who's the author of the popular book The Price of Tomorrow, where he analyzes the effects of technology-led deflation and monetary policy-led inflation. He is also the founder of Build Direct, a technology company that aim to simplify the building industry for nearly 2 decades through the dot-com meltdown, the 2008 financial crisis, and many waves of technological disruption. So Jeff has seen ups and downs of technology and what effects technology can have. So for his thoughts on technology, economy, and recently Bitcoin, Jeff has been featured in many publications, including Forbes, TechCrunch, and the Wall Street Journal. Today, I plan to discuss with Jeff why he's so bullish on a world that's deflationary, especially since all central banks prefer a modest amount of inflation. In fact, recently, at the time of recording, we have, I think, US Fed has also indicated again uh, they would keep the same monetary policy they've always had. But Jeff has a different point of view, and that's what I'm very interested in exploring with Jeff. So, Jeff, thank you so much for coming on this podcast today with me.
Thanks for having me, Paras.
Fantastic. So, Jeff, I wanted to first start with understanding a little bit about your background. As a technology entrepreneur, how did you come about thinking so deeply about economy and monetary policy? Especially, how did you come about thinking about deflation?
Um, it, it, I would say I'm curious about a whole bunch of things. Right now, I'm chairman of 7 different boards. I read 50 books a year. I'm just curious, and so if you think about what entrepreneurs do, and what an entrepreneur tries to do in the business is they try to design a business that makes things better for people. Ultimately, they try to bring down prices or give more service, more for less. And technology entrepreneurs do the exact same thing. And and so what you do by that structure that you're using to be able to do that, essentially you're looking at something that's broken in the world and saying, I can fix that thing with this technology or otherwise, and I have a better way to do it. So if you just think about that process, so as you say, what led me to this? Um, I've been a technology entrepreneur all my life and built a bunch of technology companies and very successful technology companies, and still do that today. And for the last 10 years, I couldn't understand why we live in a world where technology is making things cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and giving us more for less. It's all around us, and I couldn't understand why that wasn't reducing prices everywhere. And so instead of, and so again, I'm an entrepreneur first. That is my thing. What got me down the rabbit hole or started getting me to look into economics and everything else was the fact that I realized the system was broken, and you had 2 different forces. You had a force of technology trying to give more for less to the world, and you had a force of inflation, just because it's always been the system we lived in, that's trying to do the opposite, that's trying to drive prices up. And I realized that technology is actually a bigger force. Technology is going to win that fight, but it's not going to, it's going to be a fight that central banks are going to try to stop at all costs. And we can explore why they need to stop it, or why they're going to try to stop it at all costs. But your question about why did I write the book? Or how did I get into this? Is I got into it because I have a young family, and I worried about what their future would look like. I have a business in India. I and fantastic people there, and I worry what the world will look like for people on this epic fight of our time that most people don't even understand is happening.
Right. So, Jeff, you said that technology is making everything cheaper. I I guess an average person would probably disagree on the surface of it. They'd point to various things, right from milk to houses. Everything has become more expensive.
Yeah.
So, how would you respond to that perception that things are not becoming cheaper?
So, because in a system, and so I think first off, because this is a really complicated topic and people don't go deep enough, and so they live in the system, and that system is being manipulated to make prices go up. And so they live in that system. It's hard to see another system, what that other system would look like. So let's just explore some of these topics from first principles first. So what is inflation? Inflation is when, a simple definition is when your money is worth less over time. So goods and services get more expensive over time. And that sounds like, why would we want that?
Yeah.
Right. Like personally, I don't want my money to be worth less over time, and I don't want goods and services to be worth more over time. But again, that's all it is. And what's deflation? It's the opposite. Your money is worth more over time. Goods and services cost less over time. So forget for a moment all of your biases on which one you want, and just look at the facts. That's what each of those are. Now ask on top of that question, who wins and who loses in each system? So on inflation, if you have more assets, if you have more wealth, like I do, then those assets go up as a result, and the real cost of the debt goes down. So I pay back the debt with cheaper dollars tomorrow. So I win. People like me win. People with lots of money win in inflation. And who loses in inflation? Your savings and wages go down. So your real-time income is actually your real wages are going down against that force. It's just the opposite side of that coin. So who loses from that economic calculation? People with savings, people with incomes that don't have the assets, they lose out of that calculation. Now on the others, and so now why inflation? Why do we believe that we need inflation? Because it doesn't seem logical, right? That we would build a society around inflation. And what inflation is really for governments, it's a hidden tax. So that what it really is it's a theft, taking from the poor and giving to the rich, but doing it in a way because people don't see that it's a hidden tax. They will take, governments will say it will spend more than they can pay for, and they'll hide that tax in inflation. And so it's a really bad tax. So it actually hurts the people. And a lot of people think governments should spend more and more and more and drive inflation. And actually, the people hurt most by it are the lower, middle, and lower class, because it's taking from them. But that's actually why that exists, because government can increase their power through a hidden tax.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just trying to capture what you've said in my understanding. So you're saying inflation is where the purchasing power becomes less over time, and people with assets they grow richer, but people with liquid money they become poorer in comparison. And that's
Exactly.
what the inflation does, this transfer of purchasing power from the poor
from
to the
middle,
wealthy.
Exactly, the middle class and poor to the wealthy. And so and again, why we didn't see that, humanity didn't see it generally. By the way, India has been really hurt by it, and other countries, US has been helped by it because they run the currency around the world and people peg to their currency. So and other countries are hurt by it. So the same thing that's happening inside a country, inside the US for rich and poor, is actually happening outside the US for a whole bunch of other countries that use the US reserve system.
How exactly? I did not follow that.
Because if you're using the US reserve as your currency, and they're printing that money,
Mm.
and it's just making up new money. It's not real money. It's
Yeah.
just, I'm going to make up numbers to drive inflation. Then somebody has to be hurt by that economic calculation. And there's a whole bunch of countries, just like kind of rich and poor inside the country. There's a whole bunch of countries that are on the losing side of that economic equation.
Right.
And so but why we didn't see that, and why we didn't see it, is because technology wasn't moving as fast as it is today. And so technology, we measure inflation. Probably a lot of people that are on your show, because they've never asked these questions or listening to your show, they've never asked these questions to themselves. We get caught in a trap, and we don't question our beliefs very often. So we hear 2% inflation, and okay, that's good, because it's always been good, and our houses rise as a result of that, and somebody else is losing out of that bet. But we think, okay, that's great. I'm going to lever up. I'm going to buy more houses, or I'm going to. And if you're rich, that works really well for you. And if you're not, it works really poorly for you. But why we don't question that is we think the base is zero, and 2%. If somebody stole, really what it is theft. If somebody stole 2% from you per year, you might not notice it, but that's really what it is. But the base isn't zero, because technology is moving the other way faster. So if you take 30 years ago, you probably had disinflation about negative, like 1% disinflation.
Mm-hmm.
And so what governments did and policymakers did is they drove down interest rates and down interest rates, down interest rates over and over and over to try to grow out of technology trying to give you more for less. So they tried to, and what that did, and then there was, in the last 20 years before COVID, again, this is important because it's exploded since COVID, but in the last first, to run the global economy, there's $250 trillion of debt for an $80 trillion global economy. If you tried to pay back $1 trillion at $1 a second, it would take 31,700 years, 710 years. So these are enormous numbers, and those numbers can never be paid back. So the amount of debt. But here's the smoking gun, and if kind of my thesis said technology is exponentially deflationary. It's moving this way so fast. It's trying to give us more for less on an exponential pattern. Then debt must be compounding just as fast on the other side to be able to hide that from society. Mm-hmm. So when you break down the $250 trillion debt for an $80 trillion global economy, what you find is in the last 20 years, exactly what you would project if technology was doing more. In the last 20 years, there has been $185 trillion of that $250 trillion added.
Right.
So when you ask, so 185 trillion in the last 20 years globally to produce $46 trillion of economic growth in GDP. So $4 of debt for every $1 of growth. By the way, it's way worse now. It's getting worse and worse and worse, as it has to get worse and worse. And so what ends up happening is everybody knows that debt can't be paid back. So the debt isn't being paid back. What's happening is the governments are changing the rules and printing money to pretend it can be paid back. And so what's happening is they're actually devaluing the currency. And what people think is prices going up is it's relative prices going up against a devalued currency. So you'd have to ask yourself this. Would house prices go up over the last 20 years if there wasn't $185 trillion of stimulus globally? And simply the answer is no. There's no chance the house prices go up. Would food prices go up? Would all of these prices that you believe are going up because the currency value is going down, would they if there wasn't manipulation in the currency?
Right. And the prices going up, say for houses, wouldn't be a problem if people could afford it, if people's wages would have risen. accordingly, right?
But they
It
can't,
hasn't.
and that's the economic calculation. The economic calculation why inflation is a theft is if wages went up as fast, then it wouldn't help governments, and you couldn't get rid of the debt.
Mhm.
So inflation is wage deflation. It's just opposite sides of the same coin,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So and so that's the point. So what's happening is people are on a mouse wheel and they're running faster and faster and faster, sometimes working 2-3 jobs, trying to get ahead of man-made inflation by manipulating currency, trying to get out of this trap, running harder and harder and harder, and it's moving further and further away from them because the real wages are going down.
Right. So I'm trying to make sure I understand the debt argument right. Are you saying governments pursue monetary inflation so that they have less to pay back if they're raising?
Exactly.
That's the primary motivation.
Exactly. So now, if you have an entire economy, now think of a globally economy. Now remember, I don't make the rules. Technology it's a fact, is deflationary. It provides more efficiency. That means, and that efficiency provides a better value, and prices go down. That's a fact, and it's a harsh fact. So look at how many photos you use today versus the photos you used before. Look at music today. You can buy music for $9.95 for unlimited music, where it used to buy $19.95 for every CD. So when you digitize things, and it creates abundance, and things move to free. That's what every entrepreneur is doing. That's what I do, and everything else. So you're trying to give the world more for less, and we mistake this, and it's really important. We mistake because we don't understand economics. People don't look deep enough to economics. They trust other people to say, "Oh, that's the way the system works." That's what. And they don't ask the next question. In economics, people talk about monetary policy or quantitative easing. And if they actually said the truth on what it is, I'm going to steal more from you so you don't see it, you might look deeper. But it sounds like, that must be okay, right? It sounds like so you don't look. So again, technology has changed the rules. Prices should be falling at an ever increasing rate, and we think about economics as value. Everybody thinks of economics as about value, and economics is not about value at all. Economics is about scarcity, either real or perceived. So if you can convince somebody, if De Beers can lock up diamond supply, even though there's tons of diamonds, and convince people that their husband only loves them if they buy a really expensive diamond ring through advertising, then they can take something that's really abundant in the world and create scarcity, and charge a lot for those diamonds. Brands can do the same thing. But what, and so, and I'll give you an example here. The most valuable thing in your life today, the most valuable, is the air you're breathing right now.
Yeah.
Why don't you pay for it?
Yeah.
Because it's abundant. It's all around you and it's abundant. The only place you pay for it is if you're in a hospital with COVID, or underwater where it's scarce. And so economics is not about value. Economics is about scarcity, either real or perceived. And so what you have in the world today is technology wanting to create more for less, create abundance. And if you run an economic policy where you have abundant money, more and more money, that means everything else is scarce.
Right.
Or if you had fixed money, everything else is abundant. That's and that's what's happening today. And so governments, because they've run policies And they're trapped right now
Yeah.
because they're so levered with so much debt that if they let deflation happen today, then that debt, so the debt would get more expensive, and it would
Right.
get more and more and more expensive, and they couldn't pay it back.
Yeah.
So governments are trying to outrun that problem, which they can't outrun.
Yeah. I mean, it seems a catch-22 sort of a situation, uh, wherein the only reason governments are pursuing inflation is because they've pursued inflation. So I was wondering if magically we can reset the world today from ground zero, where the debt was zero or government debt was zero. Would it make sense for governments to pursue deflation because there is
So
no debt?
so you have to ask yourself, where does control come from? And control comes from it's easy to convince a whole bunch of people that you're doing work for, you're helping them by
Mhm.
giving them more money today that you can't pay for. It's easier to do that job than say, hey, we have to tax you the actual rate to pay for services. It's easier to hide inflation and tell people you can give them more for less, or more than you can, and then pick their pocket.
Mhm.
And so could governments change that? Unfortunately, I don't believe so. I did, when I wrote the book, I was trying to find any way possible that we could have actually a first principles conversation on this important topic for humanity. It's the biggest topic in humanity. By the way, climate change is a result of inflation. So monetary policy you can't fix climate through a policy that has to make prices go up forever.
Mhm.
That makes sense, right? Because innovation is driving prices down. So if you looked at solar, wind, everything else, even all energy prices are coming down, and everything else is coming down. So the only way to offset that green, clean energy is actually to print more money to make prices go up more.
Mhm.
So every effect that you're driving prices down, innovation on one side, they're two totally different systems. You have to counteract with more printing to make prices go up. And people are so confused because we're going through a system change. And then they say, well, the climate's getting really, the climate change is a really big issue. But the climate being a big issue is monetary policy is climate change.
Mhm.
But people don't ask these questions because they're measuring a system from the system.
Right. But isn't something like climate change really driven by consumption? I don't think I fully understood the connection, how
Okay,
inflation is connected to
so
that.
so and that's why it's hard, it'd be hard for you to see too. But let's just say, so what should happen, what is happening? So what should happening is energy prices should be trending not to zero, but they should be trending on a line. They're getting 11% cheaper per year on solar, and it's taking up more and
Right.
more of the grid.
Yeah, I agree.
So energy as one thing, not robotics, not artificial intelligence, not everything else that are also all deflationary, but energy as one thing that is powering every other industry is getting cheaper by 11% per year. And so every other industry is built on top of energy. So if that's getting cheaper, but you can't, your energy isn't getting cheaper.
Mhm.
Your gas prices are going up. So you have to spend more time driving to work, or not right now in COVID, but you have to spend more time racing on a make-believe system to try to, and everybody does, trying to chase prices up, more consumption, more shipping, more consumption, more everything, more work, when the work actually isn't even needed. The
Right.
work is only needed to support the prices that are artificially made anyways, to support the work, to pretend we live in that system. So the entire system that nobody sees, they are little cogs in a wheel of this system, not realizing actually they've become slaves to a system
Right.
that requires, because it's sometimes easier if you just looked at yourself, just one person. Again, inflation, deflation. In your own life, you want more for less.
Yeah.
Don't you think your neighbor does too?
Yeah.
Don't you think his neighbor does too? Don't you think her neighbor does too? We want more for less. Why do we believe in a system that has to go the other way? So if you want more for less, and every year you were getting more for less, would you need to work as hard?
Right.
Would,
Yeah.
would,
No, I mean,
would
you wouldn't. I mean, ideally, we want
so
everything for the least amount of effort.
exactly. So your time, what technology does is it saves your time.
Yeah.
That's why you use it. That's why every CEO puts it in. CEOs don't put it in technologies in their companies to make prices go up and make their business uncompetitive. They use it to save your time. That's the point. So if you run a system that is opposite to that natural system, all hell breaks loose. And climate change, again, inflation equals climate change. There is no way to grow forever. So inflation, the existing system has to grow forever on a finite planet.
Yeah.
And we'll manipulate money to do so. And so the opposite system, even if we can't see it, is actually what the truth is. But most people can't make the bridge because they're so stuck into a system, and they believe all the media and hype of everything else about a system that has to make prices go up forever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, technology's tendency, especially when combined with entrepreneurship, is to make things cheaper. So it does seem a little odd that a lot of things are becoming more expensive. But what you're saying is it's because the system is biased against against the average person enjoying the fruit of technology.
Exactly. And the more you do that, so imagine 30 years ago you had a little lie or a little theft. And now it was 1%. It should have been 1% negative or disinflation, so things would be getting a little cheaper. And then as more technology is entering in, it is moving exponentially. It should be getting a lot cheaper. And maybe the measuring right now is -5%. That's what it should be, the real rate. But inflation is now running at 5%. So you actually don't have a 2% theft per year. You have a 10% theft per year. And so when you corrupt money itself, when you essentially, here's a better way of looking at it. Money is just information. Nobody wants more money. They want what they believe that money will be able to buy them, or the safety for their family, or anything else. The money is an arbitrary construct. It's just information.
Yeah.
So when you corrupt information, when information is bad, just like in a technology program, if you have corruption in your code, you have corruption everywhere. When you corrupt information, then it's quite likely you have corruption everywhere as a result. And so when you look at a whole bunch of conspiracy theories and everything else, and what it feels like is the world is getting more dangerous, people are getting, that is actually all a second order derivative of corruption of money.
Right. So on this topic, playing the devil's advocate for a second, I think some people will argue government's ability to print money is beneficial because it can give money directly to the poor, just like it did in COVID, where it's called helicopter money. But in a deflationary environment, that's not possible. The government is sort of helpless and it wouldn't it amplify the rich becoming richer?
No, the complete opposite. But that's actually, so that's what you're led to believe, right? So if you just said, who does inflation help? We've already talked about this, right? Who does inflation help? So when you take that economic calculation and you say, so then what governments would do to make those programs is to expand the government power. Fair?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to essentially steal faster. So to give you money and take it out of the other pocket faster. But because people are so confused on that inflation is wage deflation, they don't know it, and they're victims of a system, and they don't know it. Just like your question actually is a perfect question, because you don't know, because you actually believe that system is helping people, and the people that it's hurting the most think it's actually helping them, because they become victims of a system that is completely unfair.
And it's unfair because people become dependent on government for such grants.
So government doesn't create jobs. The free market creates jobs. Government taxes to be able to redistribute. So if they hide their tax in inflation instead of telling you the truth on tax, then that's really a theft of economy. So as government gets bigger, the free market has to get smaller. And look at any centrally planned economy over a long time. Look at Russia. Look at anything else. What ends up happening is, as government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, they have to get bigger at the expense of the free market. And because free markets are more competitive than centrally planned economies, because centrally planned economies have to choose all of the market signals by a couple of people. And so free markets are more competitive. And if they're more competitive, they can give more wealth to their citizens. So if a government gets bigger and bigger and bigger, essentially what ends up happening is eventually it's controlled by the biggest thug. It has to be. It's just more and more central planning, taking away more and more of the free market. In Canada right now, 26% of the entire economy is government spending.
Okay.
And as that gets bigger and bigger, and it has to get bigger. And so as that
there's natural tendency to become bigger.
But again, because they're hiding inflation in this number and they're printing all this money to be able to get bigger, and more different rules come in. And what would an entrepreneur in a free market do in that case? Because prices are going up. Wouldn't they add technology to their business faster to try to reduce their price because prices are going up? Seems obvious, right?
Right.
So they would get rid of jobs faster, which would cause the government to say it's their fault, it's the free market's fault, and print more money to be able to get bigger faster, to be able to take away more of the free market.
Right.
So we're living in a pattern right now where things are moving to be centralized faster and faster and faster, because people actually believe that that's a good thing, but it's a terrible thing. Unless you believe that the person in control, the one or two people that are in control, will always be on the lookout for all people, then you've given your freedom away. That's what's happening. And then I question. Then I look at these types of things. Why in Russia or in Myanmar? Why doesn't everybody stand up? And it's actually a derivative of the same thing we just talked about. Not everyone will stand up because a lot of people think that the government they're safe in that environment, even if they're losing their freedoms and everything else. They think they're either enriched by it, they're close to government, or they're protected by it. And so not enough people will stand up. And so what ends up happening is typically the government also typically at that time controls the media and everything else. The few people that, if you looked at Navalny in Russia today, the few people that will stand up will be taken out. That's what a society would look like in that type of environment. Now ask yourself this. That's today. Where we're going in the next 10 years with technology, we'll have artificial intelligence and robotics in a way different way than we have today. Can you imagine that concentration of power with artificial intelligence and robotics and the cameras everywhere? No one's going to stand up.
Yeah.
So how big, again, into my book and everything else, how big a deal this is for humanity is a really big deal. If we don't, and it's one of the reasons that I think Bitcoin is one of the most important innovations on the planet today. Most important because it allows you to transition. Governments won't, they can't. They can't stop this pattern right now because it's a system, and it's not bad people typically. It's a system that'll keep feeding back, and a belief system that'll keep feeding back on itself. And I think Bitcoin Kodak never changed themselves. Blockbuster never changed themselves to Netflix. Businesses typically do the opposite of what technology requires, and they get disrupted by technology companies, creating better outcomes for people. That's typically what happens. All that's happened by governments stopping that action, stopping the free market from working and prices coming down, what's happened is that creative destruction has moved from the economy level to the currency level.
Mm.
And so what would you expect? So if you looked at Kodak, and how they've run their business for almost 100 years, versus we use more photos today, and Kodak actually created the digital camera.
Yeah,
they invented it. Why didn't they see it? And again, it was against their existing structure to see it, because the digital camera made photos free, and their business came from something else. So using those lenses on what's normal in a business would be normal in a government, because a business is just a collection of people. A government is just a collection of people.
Yeah.
And we assign malice, we assign these people no more than they don't. It's just a system reinforcing on itself, and that system must continue to drive more and more centralization and power at this point. Because and you asked a question a while ago that said, can we reset it? The answer is no, without revolution and war. And if you look through history, the resets of currencies are always done through revolution and war.
Right.
Always.
So thinking about government from first principles, I mean, it's a collection of, it's people taking care of each other in a very indirect way as a society. We nominate a certain people who take care of the rest of the folks. I think everyone would agree a completely centralized system is not good. It is centralization of power. But are you suggesting a complete, entirely free market kind of structure is a better way, or something of a compromise in between?
So the most important thing that I care, and why a kind of a new system like Bitcoin could allow this to happen, is all it does is moves the inflation or the fraud above the line. So you can just imagine if every government was on Bitcoin, or the Indian government was on Bitcoin. What they would have to do in a competitive market against other countries is say, here's what we're going to tax people, and government's going to get smaller, but this is why. We're going to tax people this because we want to provide these services for the other people. The only difference in the two systems are one is based on a truth and one is based on a lie. The only difference.
Right. So
what would happen is, and I can tell you from myself, I don't want to live in, if I had all the wealth and I walked out my door and 99% of people are in abject poverty, I don't want to live in that society. So I can tell you the type of government speaking truth who I'd vote for, because I would want to make sure that there was a transition. I would want so 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 mostly free market, and but in a way that was based on truth.
Right. So, and I mean, I agree. Within inflation, it's easy to squeeze in inefficiencies. Government's inefficiency typically gets squeezed in. That's why they have to inflate away debt. But
Yeah,
something like Bitcoin, which you cannot inflate, would naturally be a forcing function for better efficiency. And that's why government will have to strip down to its bare minimal functions.
totally. And so what would happen is what would happen is, and again, going to first principles, I think you would agree technology is deflationary.
Yeah.
You agree with that?
Yep.
Then you must agree with this. Anything that is inflationary, any currency that is inflationary against that force, steals power from the people and centralizes government as a byproduct. Is that true?
Okay. Anything that goes.
Anything that is inflationary against a deflationary force as powerful as technology only is so by concentrating power.
I would say it would be a consequence of concentration of power, right? Only someone in
No,
power can do that.
yeah, but I mean, if you created money out of nothing to drive inflation against the natural force, it's a natural force of entrepreneurs trying to drive prices down too free, like your oxygen. That's what would happen. That's what would happen. Then anything stopping that force has to be a concentration of power.
Right.
Fair? Has to be.
Yeah.
So today, and again, I don't say this because, like, if the world could just keep going, I wouldn't have written the book. But today, what that means is technology, where we're going for humanity, requires a currency that is both digitally native and that will allow for deflation. It has to. Because what that means is you have a technology that empowers human beings. It gives the broadest possible distribution of wealth by that fact, the broadest possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything that stops that concentrates wealth and power.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the name of I'm doing it to protect, I'm doing it to help other people.
Exactly.
I'm doing it to protect other people, but it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't protect other people. It hurts them.
Yeah. I mean, if there is a central entity like a government or a central bank, and if they decide how much new currency has to be in existence and who gets that, I think I agree. They are just concentrating their power. We're just giving more and more power to them to decide our future.
And then, have you ever heard the quote from Lord Axton? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what happens, because and people change their mind, right? Sometimes a great leader becomes an egomaniac, or gets sick and changes their mind, and everything changes. So if you concentrate power in a human being, with how we think, we can change our minds, right? And I wish that wasn't true. I wish that wasn't true, but it is true throughout history. And so if you take code, or if you take Bitcoin specifically, and removes that power from humans forever, and essentially aligns the laws of nature onto technology and nature, what ends up happening is you have the broadest abundance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But coming back to the point I was making, I agree concentration of power is natural. But we're not concentrating a power in a person there, right? We're concentrating power in a system which we'd call like a democracy. And I know democracy has many manifestations, but as an idealized system, if I mean, I really want to think from it from an ideal point of view and not an implementation point of view. What's wrong with concentrating power in a democracy?
Because a democracy based on a lie is not a democracy. What ends up happening if you're concentrating that much wealth and power, then the people with wealth and power are the democracy. Everybody else thinks they are, but they're not. That's Russia has a democracy.
Mhm.
It doesn't look like a democracy. The only people that can get elected are the people that are put into and the people that are closest to the power. Well, how much do you think Microsoft or Amazon or Google spend on lobbying last year? You don't have a chance in that democracy. You don't have a chance because the elected leaders get paid a whole bunch more by the lobbyists and everything else in and who has the money to be able to do it. So if you concentrate wealth and power out of this, it is not a democracy anymore.
Right. Yeah. I think there is like a lack for a better word, naive faith that Western countries, especially USA and say even Canada and other countries, will not become corrupt in the same way other nations have.
So here's the thing. I wish that was true too, but again, if your power comes from a lie, and that lie must expand because technology is going one way and your system is going the other way, so it has to steal more. Has to. If that is based on a lie, then democracy fails too. These are super important concepts, Paras, that very few people talk about at this depth. And trust me, I grew up in this world, and I've been a beneficiary of a stable market, laws and orders. I've been a beneficiary of inflation. I've created lots of successful companies and everything else. So I'm one of the winners out of this system. And by the way, more and more, in the last 18 months, the world's richest 500 people, not 1,000, not 2,000, not 10,000, 500 people have increased their wealth by 40% to $8.4 trillion.
Yeah.
That's what
It's
happens.
insane.
It's insane in COVID, in a time of COVID. So what you did to help all of those other people is you transferred a whole bunch of wealth to the richest 500 people. Who do you think is more influential on making the laws? And so I wish what I just said wasn't true. I really do. I would, for me to understand this at the first principles and right through it all, I had to face a whole bunch of things that I believed true and that were responsible for a whole bunch of my wealth and gains and everything else. But then I realized that then when you realize that, you realize some of that comes from the expense of other people. And I could either say, oh, that's okay, or do something about it. So I did something about it by writing the book, and all what I care about is truth and a fair system. That's what I care about. I care about a true democracy. I care about and I think on something like a Bitcoin standard, you would get true democracy.
Right. So, Jeff, we are in 2021, and these topics, like you said, they are not very easy to comprehend. I mean, these take some second order, third order consequences to digest and really make sense of these things. Given that it is difficult for everyone to grasp these intuitively, how do you expect things to play from here in future? I know future prediction is difficult, but what's the default unfolding of the world do you expect from here on, and how can we collectively shift it to be a better world for everyone?
So this is happening really fast on both. Remember, two different systems with feedback effects moving opposite directions. And so the system we're in is going to get a lot worse, and more signposts, and more, you'll see signposts everywhere. More. What ends up happening in that type of system is governments have to create an enemy. First, typically inside a country, then outside of a country, to retain power. They have to turn society on itself to be able to retain power. You are going to see that all over the world, faster and faster and faster on our existing system, because it's not. It has to be. I wish that wasn't true, but that's what you're going to see. That path. It's unstable. It's creating more and more instability. That's why these are normally fixed through revolution and war and a reset of all currencies, with the winner take all, essentially, with the winners saying what the game board looks like for everybody else. But wars won't be fought like they were fought. Wars today with AI and automate and drones and automation and everything else would look very, very different. But that is where kind of that path takes us. The exact opposite path is freedom and abundance. I'm really hopeful for the exact opposite path, but it is not a guarantee. That's why I've become actually a Bitcoin advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually think it's the best chance for humanity to make a transition. System changes are hard.
Yeah.
Right? The system changes are really hard. So the more people that start to investigate Bitcoin and what it means for them, where nobody can take your money. If they can't take your memory, they can't take your money. And if you understand that deep enough, it's really important. I don't care about the wealthy getting Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. I care about the individuals starting to understand Bitcoin. Put in $10 a week, put in $50 a week, put in whatever, but start to make a difference, because that essentially is a system that benefits humanity in general. But every single person that's doing that will understand way more. Just kind of learning about it, they'll understand way more of what we're talking about.
Right. But governments will do whatever they can to make sure they don't let go of power that easily.
But again, what ends up happening too, and you saw El Salvador kind of creating, going to Bitcoin, right? And you can see India right now is starting to talk about Bitcoin. What ends up happening is the earlier the governments actually start to explore this, the more leverage they have. Because they're again, why would somebody stop that? So you're essentially, what you're saying is, I'm stopping it to retain control instead of enable my people to be able to enjoy wealth and everything else. So I'm stopping it for control. So you're right. A lot of governments will try to stop it. You'll hear a lot of news media and everything else. But the game theory of Bitcoin means that the people that go first enjoy more of an advantage. So countries that go first and start to get on board faster. In the week after El Salvador announced that they were turning Bitcoin into a currency there, they had a 5,000% increase in searches from around the world for El Salvador real estate. They had an enormous. I'm going to go there, and not to live there right now, but I may look at a business there. They had an enormous of entrepreneurs thinking about a free market there, where you had poverty, where you had and a lot of people think that poverty, or sorry, that crime, like El Salvador had a really high crime rate before. People don't misinterpret where that comes from. It's poverty that creates crime, not the other way around. And so when you give your citizens more power and more ability to create wealth for themselves, then you stop crime. They don't have to turn to drugs or anything else to feed their families. I think that's where I think that's the natural place of humanity, where they want to do good. But if you're in a system that can't allow that, then you turn to crime. But just as a result, if you looked at what was happening on El Salvador, countries that go first, that's what's going to happen. They'll have a race of talent. They'll have a race of talent racing there for a free market that is in line with individual rights and freedoms.
Right.
And so they'll benefit. They'll have a larger benefit, just like the people that were early in Bitcoin had a larger benefit than if you got into Bitcoin today. Just like the countries that are starting to get into Bitcoin now have a larger benefit to countries that get in later. It's the same thing. So as one system breaks down, there becomes increasing benefit to go first into the other system.
That's true. Yeah. It's, I think the next, this decade or next decade is going to be super interesting to see, because like you said, there's this technology and inflation, two opposite forces, making the existing system more and more unstable. And we do have, according to you, a viable alternative. Hopefully we build a much more beautiful system around the new one this time than what we have right now.
I hope so. I hope so. There's and again, these are really deep topics and everything else. And I think one of the things that scares people about the other system, and they can't see it. So you're trapped in a system that's producing more and more negative effects all the time. And I think a lot of people can see that, but they get scared of letting go of that system and moving to a different system because of the fear of the unknown. They don't know what that one looks like.
Yeah.
Right. And so if there's no, I'm going from here to here, then it's really hard for people to understand. And I'm going to do some more work on where we're going to be able to paint the picture. But where we're going on that new system is truly abundant. It looks. I'll give you an example. In this example might not be as strong in India as it is here today, but it will be in time. Information today is free. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And that means I can learn anything on any topic at any time, and I can get the best education on the planet for free. Is that true too?
Yeah, true.
So education's already free. The best education's already free.
Yeah.
Certification is not free.
Yeah.
But what's happening is the best businesses are hiring the best talent, and some of that talent never got a secondary degree because they're educating themselves all the time. And I can tell you from hiring thousands and thousands of people, I always hire the person that's most curious and the person that cares about learning all the time, because they always are better in the business. So I don't care about an education. And lots of other businesses, when they're seeing kind of that success, they're mirroring that. So what's happening is the entire education structure that right now is getting more and more expensive because of the monetary policy, and only the people that have access to the most money can get into that system that feeds back on itself, and a whole bunch of people fall below the line. The people below the line right now, but so we live in that system because we have a belief set based on when I grew up that you'd get a better job with the best education. But that whole belief set is going to, in the next 10 years, collapse on itself.
Right.
Education's already free, and we just don't know it. We just don't know it yet. We couldn't have done this for us in a globally connected world. And 10 years ago, we couldn't have done this. So that message is spreading around the world in an instant, and it's free.
Yeah.
So if you have a system that allows that to happen, then our time is saved as a result. What the world looks like in that type of system is really, I'm not, again, this isn't a utopia question or dystopia question, but it certainly looks a lot better than what it looks like today in a system that allows for the technology to be broadly, the impact of technology to be broadly distributed.
Yeah. So Jeff, I do have one question, which is around how does this new system take care of the problems of the commons, which is, say, for example, things like pollution, where I get the benefit, but someone else pays its cost. So supposedly one role of government is to prevent that, although then seldom effective there, at least in India. But if we get rid of that, how does this work?
So I believe right now that, and I understand the argument going way back in time, kind of, I believe right now moving into a digital future where more and more things are being digitized and moving to free, that most of that work would be solved better in the free market.
Mm-hmm.
Because if a company did that, and they had negative externalities, and lots of jobs were falling out of the market and prices were getting cheaper all the time, and that company kept margins high, where do you think entrepreneurs would attack business? It would be a swarm of hornets attacking that business from all sides to deliver better value. Because the technology would enable anybody to attack that business. So that's what I think, that's what's happening today. Whereas in a previous world where you're talking about, is if you had enough money and control, you could block everybody out, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't, the same game doesn't work in a technology enabled world. Right. My first company, it took over $5 million, and I think 50 developers and everything else to build the first version of our technology platform that today is literally free and way better than that version. Yeah. It's free, right? Way better, like 100 times better than that version, and it's free. I can just plug into it on the cloud. So how do you, with a whole bunch of money and control, how do you stop your business being attacked? You only stop your business from being attacked by giving more value to people.
Yeah. Fantastic. So Jeff, this has been a really wonderful conversation. Enjoyed a lot, learned a lot, and would recommend everyone to take a look at your book. I will put that link in the interview notes. And once again, thank you so much for taking time out for talking with me. Really
no problem. It was lots of fun. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, Jeff. Take care.
Okay. See ya.